This is the map of Africa. If you look to the south, you will see lush vegetation with lots of greenery. However, when you go north, things are different. Covering multiple countries, it is the most gigantic desert globally, with miles and miles of dune formation. Altogether, the Sahara Desert covers 9 million square kilometers, meaning it will swallow Spain 18 times. However, did you know that this vast stretch of sterile sand covering a third of the African continent was covered in lush vegetation thousands of years ago? What happened to the Sahara, and what is happening to it right now? In this video, we look at the terrifying discoveries scientists made under the Sahara Desert. The Sahara Desert sits between the Atlantic Ocean to the west, the Red Sea to the east, the Mediterranean Sea up north, and the Sahel Savanna down south. It's super huge, spreading across 11 countries like Algeria, Chad, Egypt, Libya, and more. People usually think of the Sahara for its big sand dunes you see in movies. Some of these dunes can be really tall, almost like 600 feet high. But these sandy hills only cover about 15% of the whole desert. There's a lot more to it, like mountains, plateaus, plains covered with sand and rocks, salt flats and low areas. A long, long time ago, the Sahara wasn't a desert at all. It was a tropical place. So what changed it into the dry, hot desert it is now? Well, if we travel back thousands of years, we'll find some answers. The Sahara has a history of swinging between wet and dry times. This happens because the Earth's angle changes a bit, and sunlight hits the Earth differently. Sometimes there's more sun power during the West African monsoon season. These times, called African humid periods, bring a lot more rain to North Africa. That means more plants, rivers, and lakes. But around 8,000 to 4,500 years ago, something weird happened. The change from wet to dry happened much faster in some places than just because of the Earth's tilt. This superfast change turned the Sahara into the desert we know today. Archaeologist David Wright took a deep dive into old stuff like dirt and plant remains to figure out what went down in the past. He noticed something interesting when he checked out info from a long time ago, like old dirt samples and signs of plants. Whenever he found signs of people who raised animals, he also saw changes in the plants. It was almost like these folks and their animals turned grassy areas into dry lands and deserts. Wright thought that these people might have done too much grazing with their animals, which messed with how much moisture was in the air. See, plants release moisture, which helps make clouds. But when the grass got eaten up, it meant less moisture in the air and more sunlight bouncing off the ground. This might have made the end of the rainy times happen way faster than just the regular changes in the Earth's movements. Now, when you imagine the Sahara Desert, whales probably don't come to mind, right? Well, it turns out, a long, long time ago, the ancestors of today's whales were swimming around in what's now this scorching African desert. Let's go back to 1902, when a bunch of geologists rode their camels into a valley in Egypt's western desert. The wind had shaped rocks in the valley, and at night, the sand glowed gold under the moon. Nearby, there was a hill called the Mountain of Hell, because it was insanely hot in the summer. But in this dry valley, there were whale bones. Some of these skeletons were huge, like 50 feet long, with really thick backbones. These bones were from 37 million years ago, when there used to be a shallow, warm sea covering this area and even the northern part of Egypt. Those geologists didn't know it then, but these ancient bones would help answer a big question. How did whales become whales? They showed that these sea creatures adapted from living in water to living on land and back to water again. It's like a big puzzle of evolution, and these whale fossils from the desert are helping scientists put the pieces together. Millions of years ago, whales walked on land. Scientists had always thought whales were once land creatures that gradually adapted to life in the sea, losing their 4 legs over time. They had evidence. Modern whales still have tiny bones where their hind legs used to be. But finding proof in the fossil record was tricky until they uncovered a treasure trove at Wadi al-Hitan. There, among hundreds of ancient whale fossils, they discovered something incredible: legs and knees. Wadi al-Hitan, a valley near Cairo, is now a UNESCO site and draws in thousands of visitors yearly to see these fascinating findings. Scientists believe that the ancestors of whales were probably scavengers, similar to deer or pigs, living near the ocean. Around 55 million years ago, these creatures began spending more time in the water, starting by snacking on dead fish at the shore and then gradually diving in for prey. As they adapted to this watery life, they grew bigger and changed shape. Their bodies stretched out, and their rib cages widened. The fossils found in Wadi al-Hitan mostly belong to two types of ancient whales. Basilosaurus was enormous, almost like an eel, while Dorudon was smaller but had strong muscles. Dorudon looked more like today's whales, except for its frightening mouth full of sharp, serrated teeth. But in the middle of Chile's Atacama Desert, scientists discovered over 75 whale fossils. How these whales ended up there remains a puzzle that scientists are still trying to solve. Have you ever heard about the lost city of Atlantis? Brace yourself for a surprising connection to a fascinating discovery in the Sahara Desert. Let's talk about the Eye of the Sahara, also known as the Richat structure, or the Gelber Richat. This geological wonder in the Sahara Desert resembles a gigantic bullseye and spans a vast 40-kilometer region in Mauritania. For centuries, only a few local nomadic tribes were aware of this formation. It wasn't until the 1960s that the Gemini astronauts first captured photographs of it, using the Eye of the Sahara as a reference point to monitor their landing sequences. Subsequently, Landsat satellites provided more images, offering details about the formation's size, height, and overall structure. Initially believed to be an impact crater caused by a space object colliding with Earth, further studies revealed that the Eye of the Sahara has entirely terrestrial origins. Geologists now identify it as a geologic dome, housing rocks dating back at least 100 million years, some predating life on Earth. The formation comprises igneous volcanic deposits and sedimentary layers formed by wind-driven processes, including the deposition of dust, water deposits, sand, and mud. Within the Eye area, geologists have identified various types of igneous rock, such as kimberlite, carbonatites, black, and rhyolites. However, an alternative theory proposes a more intriguing connection. According to a YouTube video, the circular city mentioned by the ancient Greek philosopher Plato in the 4th century BC might be the remains of Atlantis and could be located in Mauritania. This suggests that the elusive city, the search for which has persisted since Plato's mysterious descriptions in 350 BC, might have been hiding in plain sight all along. The Sahara Desert holds some incredible mysteries that connect to ancient tales and unknown artifacts. Imagine this: a vast desert where secrets lie hidden, waiting to be discovered. Take, for instance, the Eye of the Sahara, a colossal circular formation about 23.5 kilometers wide. Plato, an ancient Greek philosopher, mentioned a city that matched the shape and size of this structure. They spoke of mountains to the north and rivers encircling the city, and guess what? Those mountains are visible on satellite images, just like Plato described. He said Atlantis, the city he mentioned, vanished in a single day and sank into the sea. Around 11,500 years ago, the Earth experienced some major climate changes, possibly when Atlantis disappeared. Some evidence in the area even looks like the aftermath of a huge wave, maybe a tsunami. But have you heard of the Clayton rings? These mysterious objects were discovered in the harshest part of the Sahara, in Egypt. These rings are like pottery cylinders with open ends, often found with perforated pottery discs slightly larger than the smaller opening of the rings. They were not used by Egyptians living near the Nile, but were part of the nomadic culture called the Sheikh Mufta. What's puzzling is that these rings and discs were found not just in the oasis or camps, but also in distant areas, far from water sources or the usual roaming grounds of herders. Why did people carry these objects so far into the desert? That's a question that hasn't been answered yet. The Sahara keeps revealing surprises, linking ancient stories to present-day discoveries. The Eye of the Sahara and the Clayton rings are just two examples of the mysteries waiting to be unraveled in this vast desert. What do you think about these findings? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to stay updated on more fascinating discoveries and mysteries, consider subscribing to the channel for more content like this.